Live long and die laughing, chapter 24. Be glad you can flush. I used to hear Nanny and Pawpaw, my mom's parents, talk about the good old days. Nanny could remember the first time she ate a potato chip and the first time she ate Jell-O. She told me stories about cowboys who used to ride through her hometown in Oklahoma when she was a little girl and shoot the church bell with their pistols. And Pawpaw said he could remember when Houston, Texas had one stoplight. I would sit for hours listening to them. I loved my grandparents. They were full of history and stories, and they would tell their tales to me over and over. And each time was as fascinating as the time before. To my little ears, their memories sounded like a fantasy world where life was simple. Time moved slowly and everybody got along. They seemed to forget how hot it was, how hard they had to work, and what it took just to put food on the table. For instance, if they wanted fried okra for supper, they couldn't just grab a bag out of the freezer. They didn't have a freezer. They had to buy okra seeds, plant them in a garden, hoe it, till it, water it, nurture it, grow it, harvest it, wash it, chop it, fry it, and by that time, they were really, really hungry. Then after they finally got a belly full of okra, they had to use the facilities which were located 20 yards off the back porch. It was a little wooden structure, just big enough for one. Unless you were rich, then you could afford the duplex model. They were called outhouses. They were freezing in the winter, but worse in the summer, when your busyness better not exceed your ability to hold your breath. One of my earliest and fondest memories of Nanny and Pawpaw is when they'd take me to the country store. I would stand in the front seat between them. This was before child restraint laws and even before seat belts. We'd sing, "I've got a mansion just over the hilltop. I'll meet you in the morning, living by faith," and other great old gospel songs. We'd sing our way down that long country road. Houses weren't so close together back then, and we drove for miles without seeing anyone. Nothing but pastures, hills, cows, and every now and then a white picket fence with kids playing in the yard. It seemed like we drove forever, but Nanny and Pawpaw always made it a musical adventure. I loved the singing, I loved the car ride, but I especially loved the small mom and pop country store. There were always two old men sitting on the porch playing checkers, and a hound lying by the front door, and everyone treated you like family. As soon as the car stopped, I'd climb over Nanny, trying to get out and race through the screen door. As the door slapped loudly behind me, announcing my arrival, I made a dash for the old cash register because I knew right next to it sat my favorite thing, a big, yellow, round slab of cheddar cheese. I love that cheese. Pawpaw would buy some crackers, 3 bottles of Coca-Cola that were 5 cents each, some meat, a few slices of cheese, and we'd head back home. Somewhere between Sugar Land and Houston, I'd hop into the back seat, crawl up under the back window, lie down, and with a full Texas moon shining down on my little body, fall fast asleep. Ah, those were the good old days, when cheese didn't have cholesterol, soda didn't cause cavities, and you wouldn't get a $200 ticket for riding in the back window. You know what? We remember what we want to remember. We all have selective memory. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved our trips, but they were long, hot, and sticky. Summers in Houston are so humid, even Pentecostals won't raise their hands. And Nanny and Pawpaw's 1956 two-tone Chevy had no air conditioning. We would roll the windows down, but that just let the hot, steamy Texas air inside. And that old country store was a breeding ground for bacteria. The hound frothed like it had rabies, and the two old drunks who were always playing checkers should have stopped long enough to patch the holes in the screen door that let in those Texas flies that were so big they could put on their own rodeos. The meat was pickled pig's feet. I prefer putting my own foot in my mouth. Have you ever gnawed on a knuckle? Now that's eating low on the hog, and the cheese was a big, round, unrefrigerated slab of cheddar that old Bubba, the store manager, would slice for us after shooing away the flies and roaches. Bubba only had one thumb. He said he lost it when he was a kid learning how to cut the cheese. I wonder who got that hors d'oeuvre. Memories are great. But these are the good old days. My air conditioner is set on 60. I have more than 300 channels of digital television at my fingertips. With a single keystroke, I can send an email around the world. I have individually wrapped slices of American cheese in the refrigerator and 2 bags of okra in the freezer. Life is good. But the main reason I know that these are the good old days is because we have indoor plumbing. Less than 5 feet from where I'm sitting, in a room just off the hallway, sits the latest in toilet technology, complete with a fluid master flushing system. There's a turbo-powered exhaust fan in the ceiling and a can of extra-strength, heavy-duty lilac air freshener sitting on the marble countertop. Sure, it's fun to think back to the way things used to be, to get nostalgic and smile at what we had and didn't have back in the good old days. But let's face it, this is the day the Lord has made, so let us rejoice and be glad we can flush. P.S. In my research for this book, I emailed my dad to ask him the make and model of Nanny and Pawpaw's car when I was 4 years old. I asked one simple question, and here was his response. Mark, when I met your mother in 1951, Pawpaw and Nanny drove a 1949 Ford, and I drove a 1950 Plymouth. In 1956, Pawpaw and Nanny purchased a new Chevrolet. It was a 2-tone brown 4-door. That is the vehicle they drove to Florida when we took a vacation in 1960. You were 18 months old and Mike was about 4 years old. Every time we stopped to eat and put you in a high chair, you thought it was time to potty. Your face turned red as you strained to do your job. And I mean, you did a job every time we put you in a high chair. We laughed about that all the way to Florida and back to Texas. They kept that Chevrolet until your mother and I gave them our 1962 Ford LTD green station wagon in 1965. When I bought a blue 1965 Chrysler. They kept that car until your mother and I gave them a new Ford around 1983. The day Pawpaw drove the new Ford home, he told me that would be the last car he would ever own. And he was right. He died 5 years later, January 28, 1988. So, the answer to your question is they owned and drove the 1956 two-tone brown 4-door Chevrolet in 1962 when you were 4 years old. Love, Daddy.